I think we can get started. So thank you everyone for joining our webinar today on driving digital adoption of the platform. The other thing I wanted to mention is, as you all know, this is a monthly series that we have been running from the beginning of the year. If you were interested in any of the other topics that happened earlier, you can just scan this QR code and you will be able to view all of those on demand. And then we have another episode coming up in December, so you can register for that as well. I also wanted to introduce our speakers today. We have Melanie, who is the Director of Customer Success Management here at Proficy Software and Services in GE Vernova. We also have Lance, who's the Business Consultant at Proficy Software and Services at GE Vernova. We're going to have just a safe harbor disclaimer before getting started. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Melanie to kick off the webinar today. So Melanie, off to you.
Great. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. As Aroni mentioned, I'm Melanie Brittingham, and I lead the Customer Success Management team here at GE Vernova's Manufacturing Business Unit. And I'm going to walk through some tips and pointers around driving adoption and the delivery of outcomes on projects as a consequence of healthy solution adoption. So we're going to focus a little bit on our process here at GE Vernova first, and then I'm going to jump in partnership with Lance and cover a case study on driving digital adoption by one of our SaaS customers, Papa John's. Which, as many of you know, is one of our pizza customers. So hopefully this will make you hungry right at lunchtime. And we'll walk through their journey of adopting software solutions. And then we'll kind of follow up with a closing section around how to optimize your support plan in order to take advantage of the learnings that hopefully we'll convey to you throughout the presentation. And we'll end with a Q&A at the end. However, I would encourage you I can see the chat in the meeting, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them on the fly as well. So please put any questions you have in the chat. All right, so getting started here, the topic of today's discussion is around driving digital adoption on the plant floor. And there's no magic bullet or secret sauce around how you do that in an organization. It really comes down to doing your due diligence around effective change management. Oftentimes in technology companies, right, we make the unfair assumption that just by installing a great piece of new software that things are just going to change on their own. And that's not really true. We have to focus, in addition to implementing fabulous technologies, you also have to focus on the people that need to use them and the processes that need to change as you begin a digital transformation journey on through the life cycle of that project. In fact, we see many software implementations seem to do pretty well out of the gate, and you know, lots of momentum and excitement around getting to that go live date. But around 6 months after project go live is when we start to see things potentially start to dwindle a little bit in terms of usership of the solution. So change management isn't just a point in time. It is a process that needs to endure throughout the life cycle of an implementation, well beyond the go live. And how we recommend you optimize digital adoption on the plant floor is really to focus on keen change management strategies that are designed to improve solution adoption at all points in time of the project life cycle. And also, as Lance will highlight throughout the presentation, that the organization really aligns around specific outcomes and that you make those measurable in order to understand what's working and what's not and make adjustments as needed throughout the life cycle of the project. Next slide, please, Aroni. So driving digital adoption, right? You know, depending on sources that you look at and research that you might do around successful software implementations, very frequently customers will tell you that the reasons why implementations fail is due to insufficient change management. You can install the best piece of software in the world, but if people don't understand why they need to use it and how it's going to benefit them and the organization as a whole, you might not have the healthy solution adoption that you need. So some successful change management tips and pointers are making sure that you actually understand your organization's strengths and weaknesses when it comes to adopting new technologies. What is your track record of success? Where have prior projects failed? What could you do as an organization to fill the gaps around those strengths and weaknesses that you may have? So things like conducting a benchmarking assessment, right? And leveraging, you don't have to create something from scratch, right? Leverage an existing methodology, right? And use that methodology to help you go faster. We at GE Vernova, we've adopted the Proficy methodology of change management, and we use that with our customers to, if they don't have a other preferred methodology, we use that because it's kind of common, right? And it makes logical sense to go out and assess yourselves on some key areas of change management focus. So with Proficy, the methodology that we've been leveraging, they have a variety of benchmarking tools and assessments that we use with customers. And we really try to understand, 5 areas of change management and the strengths and weaknesses of each organization on each of those. So awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and last but not least, reinforcement are 5 key areas that we want to understand how our customers measure up against best practices and change management. And then we will work with you to put enablement strategies in place and help you to put action plans and owners and due dates of specific initiatives that will help you go from perhaps red to green in any of those areas that are highlighted through risk assessments and benchmarking. And those joint strategies that we work with customers on, that's what really seems to drive effective change management, and making sure that that's reassessed early and often. And throughout the life cycle of the project, as I mentioned on a prior slide. So utilization is something that needs to be monitored and perhaps reassessed throughout the life cycle of a project. And as I mentioned before, reinforcement is last but not least, making sure that people understand the process and that it's sticky long after the go live date is perhaps the most fragile area that needs focus. So making sure focus on continuous improvement and also celebrating results is a key area of focus that often goes underutilized when considering solution adoption on a plant floor. Next slide, please. So there's a quote from Carl Pearson. In fact, this is often called Pearson's Law. Many of you may be familiar with it, but the quote is, "That which is measured improves, and that which is measured and reported improves exponentially." And that just makes common sense, right? If you're keeping your eye on the prize at all times, you'll know what's working and what's not. So one of the things we recommend when focusing on change management strategies is a very keen interest in the business value that the solution can and will drive for your organization. And that starts with really defining goals, making sure that the organization is aligned on why you're doing the project, what is the expected results, and how you're going to measure those results over time. So we at GE Vernova, we've kind of coined, if you will, something called outcomes workshops. And those are activities that we facilitate as customer success managers and business consultants to really align with the customers around what are the specific goals, are they measurable, are they achievable, and what's the time frame that we expect to achieve them in? And are they relevant to the organization, to make sure that we're focusing on the most impactful areas to drive return on investment. And once we have that alignment with an organization and maybe understand what barriers might be in the way of achieving those goals, then we can start to visualize them. So we really want to encourage customers to start taking baselines on the KPIs that they want to improve upon at go live or even before go live, to start to understand where are you starting from. Then setting goals as you mature along the digital maturation curve that we discussed, and then making sure that you're actually measuring your progress against those goals as well. And understanding from a continuous improvement perspective where you may need to apply Lean or Six Sigma or other 5-star activities around trying to understand, where you can move the needle to drive those KPIs to your improvement targets. And from a reinforcement perspective, I mentioned celebrating wins. Celebrating wins is an incredibly important component of driving solution adoption on the plant floor. When people start to see behaviors of adoption being rewarded and celebrated, and results being gained that deliver on the company's revenue targets or help to save money and make the company more profitable, that help shorten the total cost of ownership time and time to value for an organization, that's a real key component in that whole reinforcement part around driving results for an organization. And making sure that that stays very visible and front and center throughout the organization is critical to driving traction. Next slide, please. So with this one, I'll turn it over to Lance to talk a little bit about that visualization component.
Yeah, so Melanie had mentioned tracking a lot of the outcomes work that we had been doing. And so really, when we talk about implementing a digital system, a digital execution system, what we are becoming is that data collection system. Now, what you do with that data can be different based on different persona and based on different customers. So this is just somewhat of an approach that we have done in the past in terms of those different personas. So down at the operator level, there may be a different outcome when you compare that to the engineer level. So down at that operator level, maybe they want to see a specific set of KPIs. They want to see a specific set of visualizations that help in their everyday tasks. Now, as we go up to that engineer level, maybe they need a specific report that they want to take a look at. This could be something along the lines of quality. This may be something along the lines of labor. And then we can keep working up this chain. We can go up to the management chain, really where this then becomes real-time KPIs and resource allocation. And then we can go all the way up to the top at that executive level, where we can start to measure those strategic KPIs, which then support the overall investment decisions. So based on the different personas, based on the different customers, there's going to be different outcomes. And that's why we've invested a lot of time and resource into developing out our operations hub tool, which gives us the ability to stretch the visualizations of our data collection.
Next slide, Aroni. So let's take a look at the adoption process in motion for Papa John's. If you could go to the next slide, please. So a little bit about change management at Papa John's, right? So Papa John's, as I think most people know, is a pizza delivery company. They have storefronts all over the world. And they were really looking to digitally transform their, what they call QCC centers, right? Those are manufacturing facilities where the dough is manufactured and it's packaged and shipped off to those storefronts. And oftentimes the dough is made and consumed by end users in the same day. So it's a very real-time process. And so they looked to GE Vernova to help with an MES solution, and they implemented it at 2 sites in a proof of concept. And this proof of concept was very successful in terms of proving out the technical viability of the solution, that it could physically do all the things and deliver on all the requirements that they had in their statement of work and RFP. But what we found was interesting. There were 2 sites in this pilot. One of the sites adopted it wildly, and they were having very good success with it. They identified risks and quality challenges before the product went out the door to consumers. And in the other site, they struggled a little bit. They actually had some blips in user adoption, and they shipped some bad product when the alarms and plan application software were going off saying there's a problem. It went out the door anyway. So they raised their hand and said, you know what, we have a solution adoption challenge at one of these 2 sites. And we really think we need to focus more on change management because we've got 9 more sites to go. So they did expand their solution to the additional 9 sites in their 11 plant organization. And they reached out to customer success manager, Mark Huff and my team, and we started to work together to put a change management process in place for them. So if you go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what that included. So as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the things we recommend is that you first pick a methodology that you want to use. We use the Proficy methodology as our standard, but we'll work with customers on any change management process that you might recommend or that you have used in the history of your org as well. We happen to choose Proficy because in working for many years with customers on change management strategies, we found that a lot of manufacturers use that methodology. So we wanted to meet them where they are starting out and align there. So we chose the methodology and we think it works pretty well. But certainly we'll partner with customers on any change management strategy that you prefer. In the case of Papa John's, we embarked on a series of assessments using Proficy tools. There were 3 that we completed with them at the beginning of the transition from pilot mode to enterprise implementation. One is called an ADKAR assessment. An ADKAR stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And we also did a risk assessment with them to understand any high impact areas in the organization, and these were persona-based risk assessments, and then a PCT or change triangle assessment as well to establish some baselines of health where adoption is concerned that we can reflect back on at multiple toll gates throughout their project and make sure that we're improving on the weaknesses there. So what this really enabled is for us to work with Papa John's directly on specific targeted mitigation areas where they showed weaknesses, where they had the strengths. Great, we don't need to focus there, but let's double down on the areas that needed some focus. And in the case of Papa John's, we learned that they were very strong from a change management perspective in areas such as desire, knowledge, and ability. But on the front end and the back end of their process, they had a few weaknesses. So we focused heavy on awareness at the front end of the project and then really helping them with reinforcement after go live. And I'll show you on the next slide what that actually entailed. So from a digital adoption strategy, again, we use Proficy with Papa John's. And we looked at making sure we had action plans in place for each one of the categories of ADKAR. So from an awareness perspective, not only was the change announced to employees ahead of time, but the reasoning behind the change was explained. And that required that we really did that outcomes workshop that I mentioned at the beginning. So from a supporting content perspective, we facilitated a workshop with them and aligned on SMART goals for the project to be measured. The reasoning behind that change included current pain points and also the potential return on investment, which really helped employees to have a better understanding of why we were doing this in the first place. And that evolved into a 4-stage project plan, starting with site assessments for each site, site readiness assessments, go live plans, and then also hypercare plans. Again, that whole reinforcement piece. Moving into desire, change management readiness was assessed by stakeholder groups early on, and then risk mitigation plans for each persona utilizing or interfacing with the MES solution were created. Project champions from the pilot sites were identified and they were celebrated as having exhibited the behavior and the digital adoption that Papa John's wanted to see done. And then opportunities to address concerns were explained and employees were given an opportunity, to ask questions and participate in the deployment strategies. From a knowledge perspective, as I mentioned, Papa John's was very strong in the assessments on knowledge. They had taken a lot of time already from the pilots to develop persona-based training. So each individual user, whether they were an operator, an engineer, a manager, or an executive, we all worked through specifically what is the training that they need specific to their role. So those training plans actually evolved into job aids, and those job aids were stored in a knowledge repository that are available for repeatable reference. One thing to note about Papa John's is on the manufacturing facilities, they actually do have a pretty high turnover rate. So making sure that all of that training was repeatable and sustainable was really important for them, because they might have new people coming in on a regular basis using the solution long after the initial go live date. So making sure that that was sustainable was very important. They also were taken through super user training. So when a site is scheduled for a go live, the key super users from that site go to visit another site that's already live with the solution and have an opportunity to see and touch the system prior to it coming to their facility. And that really helps to drive excitement and adoption, because they know what's coming and they know what to expect. From an ability perspective, they did hands-on dry runs at each site prior to go live. So their go lives were multi-days, and the early days of them were actual hands-on training and actually simulated activities. And then the next day they would go live and they would go on the plant floor, and they already knew what to do with the solution. They had KPIs established from the outcomes workshop that were measurable. They had baselines in place, or captured them early after go live for the sites that are still on the journey, and they're measuring their progress against those goals. And that's where they're focusing their continuous improvement efforts. They've got a hypercare process on site. So at go live, there are people there ready for folks to come and raise their hands and get help and support. And that also includes GE Vernova support being there for any technical issues that need escalation. So those escalation paths were defined and printed and available for folks to understand, okay, if I got a challenge, here's what I need to do. And then from a reinforcement perspective, just really monitoring over time, is the adherence to required change being sustained? Are there any areas that maybe we're starting to stray away from the plan, right? And how do we get people back on focus there? Really making sure to celebrate success stories and making them very visible, rewarding employees, right? Actually, making them heroes in the organization, but also giving them some incentives in the terms of gifts or credits that they can redeem for products they might want to purchase. So there's a rewards and recognition process in place around the MES project. And then, validation sessions are occurring to ensure, hey, are we following the standard processes? Are we measuring process adherence? So to support this journey, our marketing org really chipped in with Papa John's, and we helped them to create content that would drive the awareness piece on that front end. So some messaging, a communications plan that talks about the project overview. We did a video with Papa John's to help them understand the value of the pilots and why they were doing the project, access to project sponsors and scheduled interviews with them, project timelines, signage in the plant floor. I mentioned the training repository, and then celebrating and promoting those success stories. So in partnership with Papa John's, our marketing org and our customer success management team really did a nice job to help support that transformation. Next slide.
So part of this adoption strategy and through the outcome workshop actually yielded an enterprise KPI dashboard that was also deployed. So what we were able to do was identify the different KPIs, create an enterprise dashboard that was provided to the Papa John's leadership. And through that, Papa John's identified that there was also a want to bring some of these KPIs down to the plant level, where plant management could actually visualize some of this information. So we were able to create a second set of dashboards where we were able to put this down at that site level, have more of a granular view into those KPIs, more of a real-time view rather than that executive view. So we can see that in the bottom left-hand side there. And so what we're still doing, so we are working through some data validation. We're also really taking a look at how we can incorporate some of these dashboards into daily operations, and then also address the other personas that we had also mentioned in the previous slides.
So results from the project so far, right? In terms of change management, Papa John's has established a repeatable communications plan. So they have 11 sites total. They've deployed 9 out of 11 so far. They still have 3 more to go. And they have this repeatable content now that they're using before a go live, during the implementation and at go live, and then after each go live to make sure that they have created excitement, that they have the organizational alignment, and that they're communicating progress, right? Those are 3 very important things. A communication plan cannot be underwhelmed if you really want to see healthy digital adoption on the plant floor. As I mentioned, they have the hands-on training, the job aids by persona, and the training repository where they sustain all this information. So training is not just a one-time event. It's a process, and it's applied in a repeatable manner across each of their sites. As Lance talked about, they also have measurable KPIs. So the goals that they wanted to achieve around improving quality and yield and reducing waste and downtime, all of those KPIs are measurable. So they can actually see their progress in real time, whether it's at a shift level on the plant floor towards their goals, or whether it's at an enterprise level across multiple sites. They know how they're doing on their progress. So being able to see that actually enables them to calculate their return on investment. It also helps them to understand where maybe they are not achieving specific results that they want to be achieving. And that's where they're focusing their continuous improvement efforts. So when they see one site has a higher downtime rate than another, or one shift has a worse downtime rate than another, they are actually doing the double click to look at top reasons for downtime, et cetera, and ferreting out where the problems are lying. So what that's kind of resulting in is that the employees that are using the system, they're really understanding the importance of the project. They're seeing results. They're seeing their peers get celebrated when good things are happening and KPIs are improving. And that's yielding a culture of embracing the solution. So that's where the digital transformation and adoption is really occurring. Next slide, please. So these are only 30-minute sessions, so we're just going to jump straight to a shameless promotion here at the end for our Enterprise Acceleration Plan. So Arun, if you can go to the next to last slide, I think. Acceleration plans are GE Vernova's support plans. Many of you have them in place today. More than likely, you have a premier level of support. And so one of the things we want to make you aware of is that the change management services we've walked through today in the case study with Papa John's were enabled through our enterprise level of acceleration plan. So that combines the traditional tech support needs of customers with support and maintenance components of acceleration plans, and also combines the education services, the adoption and outcome services, and some value-added services such as credits in your support plan for services or for architecture consulting sessions, right? These things can all be brought together to enable a change management strategy for you. So if you're struggling with adoption on the plant floor, we would highly recommend you reach out to your customer success manager or your account manager and have a discussion around enterprise acceleration plans.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add to that, Melody, real quick. There was a question in the chat about how do customers go about creating KPI dashboards in Proficy. And I think that directly relates back to that last slide with the support of the acceleration plan. You know, one of the core activities when we talk about the enterprise acceleration plan is that outcomes map. And through that outcomes map, that's really where we can start to understand the KPIs better and then create dashboards around that.
Good point. So in the Papa John's example, right, they have an enterprise acceleration plan, which, by the way, it actually comes standard on any of our SaaS applications. I see there's a question in the chat around why does enterprise level come standard with SaaS and not on-prem? Primarily comes down to subscription-based sales, right? I mean, as an organization, GE Vernova knows that change management is really, really important. Especially when you're selling a subscription, where at the end of the subscription, a customer could theoretically unsubscribe, right? We want to make sure that doesn't happen. And so we are including the change management services and subscriptions. We're not requiring that on any term contracts at this point in time, but it does come standard for SaaS. And so in the case of Papa John's, they actually used the services credits that were included in their enterprise acceleration plans to have Lance build them those dashboards. So yeah, that's where enterprise comes into play, is that there's funding built in to enable the visualization component if that's how you choose to redeem those credits.
There's one more question on the chat. So it says, thanks for sharing your use case. Why did you choose to create different dashboards, enterprise and plan level, versus creating one dashboard where you can click and zoom in on specific sites as well as zoom out on the enterprise level? Who is maintaining the plant level? Yep.
So that really came down to the want from Papa John's, right? The plant level managers did not care about what was happening at the other sites. They wanted focus on their daily operations and their single site. So they wanted a view just into those KPIs that were specific to them. So we wanted
and they wanted it just for the shift in process, right? If I remember correctly, it was they were looking at KPIs towards a shift level goal. So that was just part of their requirements.
Exactly.
But, on that note, we do have other dashboards that I've seen. Lance and I have partnered on a couple of accounts to build some KPI dashboards for customers where you can change the time frame from, like, if you wanted to look at current day or the last 2 weeks, right? You just enter different time intervals and it will, expand the data based on whatever start and end time you put into it. If you wanted to look at, so I think it's totally possible to essentially create one dashboard where you could click and zoom in or not. It really comes down to the organizational requirements, and quite honestly, takes a fair amount of time to get organizational alignment around what you want that to look like. What do your users want to see? What do they need to know? And what do they want to be visible, and where? Are they going to look at it at a big screen on the plant floor, or is somebody in a back office looking at it, from a monthly ops review perspective? What are those various use cases? So that needs to have clear requirements defined around that up front before you just start throwing visualization out there. Make sure it's meaningful and that it actually enables whoever the persona is that should be interfacing with it. Are there any other questions?
If not, we do have a quick survey today. We want to get your feedback on what you thought about the webinar session and how we can improve. And as Melanie mentioned, if you would like to connect with your customer success manager, you can also note that on this survey and we will make sure to follow up with you. Thank you so much for attending.